Up next, panel discussion. Topic: Building the next automotive generation. Searching database for panelists. Panelist 1, Jamie Butters, Executive Editor at Automotive News. Panelist 2, Alan Haig, President of Haig Partners LLC. Assigning host, Paul J. Daly. Collaboration loaded, cue intro sequence.
Check 1, 2. All right, so we saw this guy wandering around in the parking lot, and he looked like he was trying to find a ride home, but Alan grabbed him and said, "Come on up here, Rick Ricart." And so he just listened to what Alan said.
That's the story of my life. Kind of a lot lizard that gets picked up at the last minute. So.
Well, does your wife agree with that? She was like,
She would be if she was here. She'd be cheering loudly.
Okay, great. Well, today we're talking about succession and the transition of an industry from one generation to another. And there's obviously a lot of topics to dive into. We have a lot of perspective on the stage. Jamie, you have a very broad perspective of the industry at large. Alan, you're a part of a lot of insider conversations when it comes to transitioning dealerships, even a lot of conversations that are probably more personal. We're like, how do I keep my family together, right? So I think that insight and some of those things will really help steer us. And Rick, you're just a part of the new generation coming in and kicking things over and saying, actually, we can do it this way, have a lot of fun, and still be super successful. So I think we have a really good blend. I do want to remind everybody, this session, I think this will be a really great session for this. If you open your app and tap on this session, you will be able to ask questions. It is now live. So topics like this tend to have, I think, they say usually when someone asks a question, there's 10 other people that think the same thing. I think with succession and acquisition, it's when someone asks a question, there's probably 100 other questions that aren't being asked, so there is a little anonymous feature there. So if you want to ask an anonymous question about succession or anything of our guests, you can do that as well. But if you do put your name on here, I will probably read your name just to give a little more context to that. So thank you for being here today, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
You bet, glad to do it.
Okay, so let's kick this off. I'm going to kick it off with Rick. So tell us about the transition to your leadership of the group. You came up in the industry a little bit. Just give us a minute or two background of how you came up in the industry and what the transition looked like.
So my story began full-time 20 years ago. So I finished up college at Northwood University. So I got the 1-year post-grad year of all the automotive marketing management classes, which was a real big help because back then I was just selling cars. and I sold cars, did the sales desk, secondary finance manager, kind of worked my way up through. And then started GM positions about 12 years ago. And so what happened in our family was 6 years ago, my Uncle Rhett, and a lot of people know his name because in 2020 he was the chairman of NADA. And he had to make a decision between him and my dad. Do they want to sell the company or do they want to pass it on to the third generation? And the first thing that they had to determine was that myself, my cousin, my sister, and a few others up in the business, do we get it? Do we want it? Do we have the capacity to actually do it? Because the company that they built, they didn't want to pass it on to anyone that wasn't truly all in and understood what they were doing. Once that happened, I think that's when really succession started. And we had a succession consultant come in and kind of work through our positions and what that career path would look like. But at the same time, it's the succession of how does the second generation step aside? How do they clear the runway so that we can make mistakes? My uncle did that by getting political, by joining, NADA, doing the state level, and then getting up to the national level, which took a lot of his time and became his day-to-day job. It took him out of the store for a couple 100 days a year, which allowed my cousin and I to really be able to take the reins and to have to make all those day-to-day decisions, and knowing he was a phone call away, or knowing if I want to call my dad, who was a marketing guy, a crazy idea guy, but really understood the business. And so we had a couple, I'll call them oracles, that we could kind of bounce some stuff off of. The other thing that we do as a family is we openly communicate, we over-communicate. We have a family business meeting at least once a year, and that's not just the family members in the business, that's those that are connected to it, siblings that aren't in the business, so that everyone really knows what's going on. They know what each of our roles are and what our responsibilities are and what the vision is of the company moving forward.
How many people is that about that get together for that meeting? For those meetings?
It's roughly 10 to 12. You know, it's optional. In the third generation, there are 5 active family members that are in the business, and then I have, another couple brothers and sisters that aren't in the business, but they'll be connected to it because the way succession and estate planning is written, their names are involved in there. So they care about what's happening within the company. They care about how the company's doing. They're just not influencing the day-to-day.
Okay, thanks for that background.
Yeah.
We'll come back to this, and I would love to know some of the changes and things that have happened. So we'll come circle back to that, but thanks for giving us that background. Alan, I'm going to come down the line. I'm going to go down the line once, and then from then it's a free-for-all. So feel free, get out, stand up, wave your arms and all that. Jamie is an arm waver if you haven't noticed. Yeah.
Hold back.
Alan, so you've been a part of family transitions for how long? Because you obviously started in AutoNation years, but how long have you feel like you've been in the middle of family transitions?
The first time I made an offer to buy a family's business was in 1996. It was Carlisle, Lincoln Mercury, in Clearwater, Florida. They had Acura and Ford as well. And there was Mr. Carlisle and his son were in the room. And I wondered why the son wasn't going to be taking over. And we had that conversation. And I've been in rooms where the father can sometimes be dismissive of his son, to say, well, Junior doesn't have what it takes to run this business. And so I don't want to leave it to him because that could harm his sisters who depend upon it as well. So I'm going to sell it now. And they're in the same room having this kind of conversation. And it could be ugly. And I look at the son and I'm imagining what the son is saying to the dad. And sometimes they say it out loud, which is, well, Dad, I really want to be a better father than you were to me. So I want to be there for my kids. And so it's better for us to take the cash and allow me to do something where I can be home on weekends, birthday parties, football games, etc. And so I see a dichotomy that's happening a little bit in this industry going forward, where the dealer used to have one store, maybe 2 stores, and they were in that business 80 hours, 100 hours a week. They were there opening up the service drive in the morning. They were there closing the doors at night. They were there till the last customer left. The hours that were required for an entrepreneur to be successful in a traditional dealership model are extreme. And the sacrifices are, you can't avoid them, right? You can make a lot of money. You could sometimes have a problem on the family side because you're not present. So this panel is a little about next generation. And what we're advocating is for families that want to remain in this business to not stay at 1 or 2 stores. I think that the 1 or 2 store dealerships are going to have a harder time competing in the future. So we're advocating those groups to grow, to acquire more dealerships, to acquire more talent. And eventually when you get into a level of 8 or 10 rooftops, and I'll look at Liza here for confirmation or rejection of this, but at that point you can put in place a layer of management, a CFO, a COO, an HR person, an IT person, a legal officer, where that dealer is no longer opening up the store. What that dealer is doing is becoming an investor and a professional manager of a diversified group of companies. And that evolution, it's a different type of skill, I think, that's required from the dealer. In the past, it was very tactical, operational in nature, and I think the future dealer is going to be one that has to be able to collaborate with more OEMs, more lenders, more general managers, more executive officers to achieve that group of being 10, 20, 30 rooftops or more. And that's going to be an incredible legacy for them to pass down to their kids, because it won't require them to make the same sacrifices on their family to be a highly successful business person. And that's my hope for younger dealers in the audience here today, is that they take that message and maybe they can have their cake and eat it too. When you're younger, you have to work hard, you make those sacrifices. But as you're older and you can have professionals assisting you to run a business, you can have a better business and a better life. And that's what I'm hoping for guys like this to my left, compared to what their fathers had, where they had to really be a slave to the store.
You know, Alan's right, the whole quality of life, right? And that's something, when I grew up, it was the 80-hour weeks. You unlock the store, you lock it at night, you work 7 days a week. And I have kids now. I don't want to work 7 days a week. I want to have hobbies. I want to ride my motorcycle. I want to travel. And to be able to do that and work productively and to be able to set the example and let your employees we have flex scheduling now. When employees have a kid's birthday or something, we let them have the day off. I mean, that was crazy back in my day to do those type of things. And I'll make a quick point. I mentioned the 6 years ago, right, having the conversation, what's the future of our company? The other decision was, do we want to scale or sell? Because if you're a 1 or 2 point store, like you're saying, and we weren't 1 or 2 point, we had 6 franchises on one location, but the average consumer only, will drive 10 miles to get their maintenance done. But we sell cars really to a 75-mile radius. So we have to look at it and say, how do we diversify our portfolio of products, and how do we get into other areas of the city where our customers are buying cars from us, but we're not seeing them in service? Because to be able to scale and to have multiple brands and multiple locations, I think is the only way to truly survive in the future.
So speaking of the future and what it's going to be to scale and sell, Jamie, you've been following this transition to EVs since probably the hybrid came out, and they were like, oh, this is the future, right? And that was a lot of years ago. And here we're finally getting to the point where government involvement and kind of force feeding it is becoming a major consideration in the future transition of dealerships and what the next generation will have to deal with currently, and who knows what in the future. So maybe you can give us some of your insight on how that transition has come and how you see it potentially impacting the next generation.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those risk factors in what has been, just an amazingly stable and profitable business, right? And I think it's something that the finance community has really learned over these last couple of cycles, how resilient and profitable this industry is. And of course, a lot of people look at it and they think it's structural, right? Because of the franchise laws or because, there's margins built into it. But what they don't always appreciate is how resourceful and, clever all these entrepreneurs have to be to make it that way. It doesn't just happen. They all create it through their own
It's not
innovation.
just we speak it forth and it happens.
Right.
Which is the feeling sometimes that you get.
That's absolutely. And if you're a portfolio manager in New York, you kind of just have to look at it that way. But it actually happens because of all these people and their colleagues who come up with so many ideas. So with EVs, though, that is a little bit of a challenge, right? I mean, for the automakers, they are still not profitable. They're not even close. And we see already they are trying, maybe the UAW talks aside, they're trying to, get some of that back from all of their business partners. They're leaning on their suppliers. There's less margins for dealers. And of course, there's concerns about the maintenance revenue that comes over time from the EVs. We're hearing, repairs take longer and there's a lot of opportunity there, but that may be a short-lived, early phenomenon of the EV market in that. So definitely that is one of the big risks. And, if you think it's going to really play out over decades. Liza said she doesn't think we'll ever get to all EVs, but by 2030, 2035, 2040, 2050, which is totally in the horizon of the careers of a lot of us, it's going to be a bigger and bigger part of the market.
So, Rick, you seem to be someone who has leaned in to the transition to EVs from my perspective, whether that's vehicles or motorcycles, right? Like, you seem to be enthusiastic about new technology in general. And it seems like you've embraced it. Is that true?
Yeah, at least from what you see on the marketing standpoint, right? You want to look like you're embracing it. The truth is, in Columbus, Ohio, there's not a lot of demand for EVs yet at all. And the infrastructure and the investment at the dealerships is years in front of where we're actually at from a sales standpoint. By the end of the year, we'll have 50 EV charging stations across our 4 locations. And there are 16 EVs in stock for sale today. It's just, it's not quite there yet, and it's going to be a very slow kind of trickle. I think that the hype a year ago, right, and as a Ford dealer, Ford was creating a whole lot of hype around the Mach-E and the Lightning, and talking how people should be so excited. The problem is people are hesitant, and they're expensive, and they are looking at more efficient internal combustion engines today. And I drive an EV, I drive an F-150 Lightning, I love it. The speed, the handling, not having to stop at the gas station, there's so many benefits, but it's a much slower matriculation to the general public, at least at least in our market. So it's not going away. I think there's a marketplace. And really 5 years ago, before COVID and everything, we were up here talking about alternative transportation and how afraid are we of Uber and Lyft and 16-year-olds not getting their driver's license and you know, are we even going to sell cars in 10 years? And so now it's just another disruptor that we can either look at it as it's going to disrupt our business, or we can be innovators and embrace it and say, okay, how does this fit into my business and my market? And I just tell any dealer, don't get out in front of your skis. Don't stop turning down your internal combustion engines that you're being allocated. Like, it's going to be a small percent of the business that's going to slowly grow. But the EV hype in our market is dead. Just the hype isn't there anymore. One positive thing, and I don't want to say anything good about Tesla, but I'll say this, that what they've done with the status and the branding, as I was talking to an 18-year-old the other day who had just got his license, and he didn't get his license because he wanted to buy a Mustang or a Civic or something. He got his license because he liked Tesla and he's willing to drive an EV. So if the EVs are a way to get our foot in the door and get somebody to get their license and get them on the road, you know, I like to think eventually I can get them behind a V8 engine with a stick shift and show them what a car is really about.
Well, and you might get them behind better Fords in another couple generations,
True,
right?
yeah,
Tesla's
yeah.
further along,
Yeah.
and so they figured out how to make money off of them. And it's not just, partly it's they have a hot brand that a lot of the kids love, and a lot of, you know, crypto bros and everybody else love too. But, you know, Ford, you look at what Ford did, right? They took an F-150 and they put electric motor and a big battery in it. And it lets you get a cool truck, but it's not optimized, right? And now they're working on, you know, the truck that's going to have the skateboard platform that's going to come out of, you know, Tennessee and Kentucky. And that's going to be a lot better. Probably the one after that is really when they can make money and really compete with Tesla, even at the bottom line, not just can we offer a car at the same price and we lose $5,000 and they make $5,000. But it's going, you know, we're in these early days and it's going to get better.
It's definitely a time right now where we're dealing with the desperation of rushing product to market just to try to get the names out there and live off the media hype, which now is getting exposed.
Desperation is a good word to use.
Yeah, and because they want to show that they're in the game, and unfortunately, as sometimes do, they lean on the dealers to make the investment before the market's ready, before the technology is all figured out. They've had you all put in CCS chargers, and now they're switching to NACS.
Right. Well, as long as they made Wall Street happy. That's
Right.
what they really care about.
Alan, this brings an important conversation when it comes to, you know, succession. How are these uncertainties and potential or actual expenses being factored in to valuation conversations? And are you hearing anything behind the scenes about, you know, different generations saying, should we stay in, should we get out? Because of EVs.
So the first question, when Ford announced the requirements for its dealers to be able to sell EVs, and the cost of that was estimated about $1.5 million per rooftop, we had 2 transactions fail immediately. The buyer said, well, that's a seller obligation. That's got to come off the purchase price of $1.5 million. And the seller said, no, that means you're going to be able to sell these other vehicles in the future. That's an investment.
Congratulations, the seller said.
Yeah. And the buyer didn't believe it. The buyer said, no, it's either you got to cut the price or out. And so the seller didn't want to cut the price. And so both those deals failed, and they've not sold. So you could argue that Ford reduced the goodwill value of its dealer body by $1 million or more instantly overnight with that requirement. If they had compelling results from the EVs, the story would be different. It really would be an incremental benefit to dealers, and therefore the investment's worthwhile. But right now, the investment to the reward is backwards. So I think that it's a challenging time now for people looking at buying some of the domestic brands because they need to make that transition to EVs, but the product is not there yet. That typical customer for a domestic brand hasn't cared that much about fuel economy, right? I mean, when you're driving an F-150, you care about something else. So from a valuation standpoint, the EV has been negative for those franchises. In fact, probably negative for almost all franchises because Mercedes dealers had to make similar investments. And I would say the Mercedes EVs have been unappealing to the market so far. Does anybody have a Mercedes franchise in here? What's your longest day supply, EV or ICE? EV, right? So the newest, hottest products are the ones that are selling the slowest. That's backwards. So that comes back to your comment. I don't think it's just Columbus. I think it's there's certain states along the West Coast, California, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, I think are early adopters for EVs, but the middle part of the country is, I believe, the slowest. So to require all dealers nationwide to install these chargers, it's just not the right thing for the dealer body. What was the second question?
The second question was maybe what are some behind the scenes conversations going on regarding like, are we willing to tackle this EV thing, or is it a time to get out? Like, what are you seeing, like maybe even both sides enthusiasm for it? The parents willing to hand this challenge on, or the next generation being willing to accept or reject the challenge?
So you mentioned before there are all these risks that come up. 5 years ago it was a subscription model too. Don't forget that one. Maybe that was only 3 years ago.
We're gonna die there. It's almost like hurricane warnings from the national from the Weather Channel.
Yeah.
It's gonna crush everybody. Actually, the category doesn't matter. It's gonna be really bad.
Yeah.
Right?
So when I started in 1996 in the business, it was the public companies are going to take over everything. So we had a lot of dealers calling, asking, could you please come buy my company?
You said 96.
96. That's when the public company consolidation started. And then it was the internet was going to erode margins for everyone, you know, and then it was Tesla, and then it was, you know, there have been 30 risks that have happened, and the dealers have thrived throughout all these risks because the business model is so flexible and because entrepreneurs are so creative and resilient. We don't have enough technicians. What do? We raise our rates, right? You focus on the higher levels of service, not oil changes. So the conversations that our clients are having when they decide, hey, maybe we don't want to stay in this business, some of it is these risks that exist that concern them, because in your service department today, I mean, if you get in a heavy-duty diesel, that's a $12,000, $15,000 repair. I can see you smiling already.
Our Super Bowl commercial, I got the Sir Mix-a-Lot song and did a rap to I like big trucks and I cannot lie.
So it's a huge...
Get all the trucks in there you can. That truck service is everything.
Yeah, so it's a huge part of your profit is the fixed operations, and EVs can diminish that. Or you could lose share to Chinese manufacturers that have lower cost of production and frankly better technology than domestic brands have. So those kind of risks are in people's minds, coupled with the fact that blue sky values are more than double what they used to be. So if a family that exits now can have generational wealth, they don't have to work for another 5 or 10 years and then exit. They can really do that now. And so I think for some families are deciding, okay, well, my business used to be worth 50, now it's worth 75 or 100. That's another few years of me working. I don't have to take the risk of what happens with EVs in my service department. I don't have to take the risk with Tesla or some other brand coming taking share from me. I can exit now, pay my taxes, create a family office, invest that wealth in real estate, private equity, venture capital, anything I want to, and I will never, I don't say I'll never go poor, but I'm not going to have the sleepless nights that I might have today having all of my net worth in auto dealerships. So that's often what we see with family calls us and says, okay, we've met as a family, 10, 12 people in a room, and we've decided that we don't have a generation here that wants it bad enough to bet their career on it, and the family doesn't want it bad enough to bet their wealth on it, and that's when we get the call.
It's maybe not a coincidence that Crane Communications started a family office publication as well.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I'm going to add that to the list of our morning readings. So
yeah, you'll
try
need
to
that.
Get some nuggets out of that one.
We'll have some referrals
No,
for
I'm
you.
blanking on the name.
Okay,
Shame on me.
Okay.
I'll text it to you later.
Gotcha. Family office news. We'll just call it that. Yeah. You know, Alan. Actually, Jamie, I want to stay with you for a second. You have kind of a unique access, or at least, you know, Automotive News puts on the 40 under 40 every year, and it's a big deal. And you kind of go into the industry, and these bright stars start to like surface. And so you kind of have a little bit of an understanding of like the different personalities and the demeanors. Is there a common thread that you see from the next generation, these 40 under 40, that you know that you can kind of draw out for us?
You know, a lot of it. Let's see. There's a lot of really tech forward, right? That's as we see across the generations. But you know, with our 40 under 40s, they're really a lot of them are leading the digital retail efforts in their companies. They're leading a lot of the social media and that form of marketing, new forms of marketing, and of course how you use you know, AI and smart technology for you know, interacting with customers and automated chat and things like that. So I think there's definitely a part of that.
That brings you back to something that Rick said when you said, yeah, we're leaning into EVs because we want to at least look like we're embracing it from a marketing standpoint. I would agree with you that this next generation, just because of the era they grew up, have just an awareness of broad level brand marketing that hasn't been seen as marketing mentality aside from localized brand. I think has been kind of like the older generation really owned that and did really well with it. When Rick, you are kind of saying look, public perception matters a lot on understanding the pop culture narrative of EVs are the future, right? Because we're hearing it from the government. Companies like Tesla made it cool, and the reality that we see in the auto industry. So tell us how you reached that conclusion. We need to look like we're embracing this at least.
It goes into, we have a PR company that we work with, and to be able to...
Explain that for a second. So you actually have a PR company. Let's start there.
Yeah.
So you said we need to have a PR company and not Sally, who came up as a receptionist to market this group, which Sally could be a rock star too, right? There are Sallys that run PR companies now, but why did you decide to hire a PR company?
Because for 10 years I ran all the marketing and I had no actual traditional background and I didn't even know what a PR company did. And then I'm sitting in the room with a guy that was supposed to be kind of my number two and this experienced marketing professional. And he pulls up a Bill Gates quote that said, if I had $1 left to spend in marketing, I'd spend it in PR. And I'm like, I wonder why he said that. So I bring it up in a board meeting, and we've got a guy on our board that is a former marketing professor at Ohio State, and he brings it up and says, oh yeah, I started interviewing these PR companies. And what I found was by getting some of that earned media, of course it's a hot button. So whether it's Columbus Business First or our local newspapers, magazines, online trade publications, they all want to know what's going on with EVs. What are we doing? What does that future look like? And if we're going to invest in Ford certified elite pro, whatever they call it now.
Keep adding words.
Yeah, just keep adding the words. No new acronyms. No new acronyms though. Please, no new acronyms. We want to be able to tell that story. And I can't go on a TV commercial and start singing and dancing. Look at all our chargers. Nobody wants to see that. But to get to those higher level publications and to be able to talk about the infrastructure, the investment that we're making, be able to talk about range anxiety. We also had a benefit in Columbus, something called Smart City, which was a NHTSA grant through Paul Allen's foundation, and the city of Columbus got a couple $1 million about 5 years ago to do some leading edge research on EVs and autonomous vehicles. And so that was getting a lot of press and headlines. So we joined that group, we got a seat at the table, we got to be part of that conversation. The whole time we're hesitant going, okay, where are we really going with EVs? But when it comes to the public perception, we are all in. Our bank account shows that we're all in, so we might as well tell the city that we are all in. So whether it's 2%, 5%, or 10% of the population that's shopping for EVs, we just want to make sure that they're on their shopping list.
Do you consider those spends? So it's almost like you're considering what would be, it shows up on the balance sheet as an infrastructure, a capital investment. You're kind of treating it more like a media spend. I mean, when you say it that way,
you're not going to get an ROI on the actual capital for years. So you might as well try to get it through public perception and branding, and be able to show them that we are an authority in EVs. We know you don't want one today, you may not want one tomorrow, but when you're ready, we are going to be ready. We're going to have the technician bays and the battery storage and the charging stations and the staff that's trained up, be able to talk the talk, be able to offer. We're actually converting a former Mazda showroom into we're calling it an EV Experience Center, where we can put one of each model available for free test drives, let people come in and try them and learn about them without the pressure being sold. It's actually our mobile service and pickup and delivery building also. So it's got multi-use, but from the customer standpoint, it looks like it's just this EV-centric, headquarters where they can stop in and learn about all the different EVs from all of our manufacturers.
All right, so we have about 6 minutes left. I have several questions. Please do. We have time.
You have such a great example from your own, mid-Ohio area. Honda, of course, has a big footprint there. And I think I got an email recently from maybe my local Honda dealer or from Honda directly saying, everyone's interested in an electrified future, in EVs. Come down to your Honda store. I'm like, Honda didn't have a single EV at the time, but they were marketing that they're going to be your brand for EVs, right? So everybody's all in on
true.
putting the image first, and we'll get the product when we get it.
Well, I mean, on a lot of things in life, I guess. This question, first one, is from Anonymous. Apparently, Jamie has a secret admirer. It says, how did Jamie Butters get so beautiful? That's literally a question somebody asked.
It must be Jordan.
Must be Jordan. He said it must be Jordan Cox, our head of community. All right, so Kelsey Crawford asks, what is one change in the industry that you hope to see in the future? Actually, Kelsey, if you could clarify that question and maybe direct it toward one of our panelists, because if we give everybody a shot at that one, we'll be out of time. So maybe just pick one person. We have, I think this is a good question for Alan. What additional roles and responsibilities have to be created to manage the family side of the business? Actually, this is a question for Rick. What additional roles and responsibilities had to be created to manage the family side of the business? Are they managed internally or externally? And are they paid for those responsibilities? So the question really, like, did you have to create extra roles as you transitioned to manage the family side of the business?
You don't have to create extra roles as long as people are willing to get out of their seat, as long as they're willing to create some path for it to go through. We didn't create extra roles, but we did restructure the company. And in the summer of 2020, my cousin and I, we started running the EOS operating system, where we got into two different roles, where my title is technically visionary, and I work more on the business.
Explain,
Culture,
EOS
creativity,
is...
acquisitions, big deals, big relationships. And my cousin is the integrator, so he runs in the business. And you got to be able to really be able to balance and do both. So it doesn't matter about creating positions. Just make sure you're focusing on what's happening in the business, because you got to operate correctly, make money, and then also be able to focus on the business to understand all those outlying factors and where you're going in the future.
So you're saying you chose a structure, the EOS model, and then you use that model to define the roles.
Yes.
So that you could operate within that agreed upon structure.
Yeah, because in a family business, you could create all kinds of roles. And we had a firm policy years ago, A, we don't create part-time positions for family members, and B, there's none that are just on a salary. There's got to be some kind of performance component to it so that no one's just getting a free lunch.
Gotcha. Alan, you've been a part of a lot of these conversations. What roles have you seen be created effectively to manage the family side of the business?
Everybody has certain areas they naturally gravitate towards. I mean, you mentioned you're on the visionary side, so your corporate development, your business development, you're looking for new opportunities, figuring out how to invest the capital. And I probably would fit on that side of the scale. Years ago, I had a guy named Jack Pring, who was from Spokane, Washington, and he analyzed my handwriting. And I did it on the sidelines of a conference like this, AutoNation, back in 1996, and he asked me to write my name 3 times. And I did, and he took it away, and he came back and goes, okay, Alan, I could tell you're a guy that likes projects, big ideas, you like to move fast, but you don't really care about the details.
You got to be kidding.
And I said, how'd you figure that out? I was like, well, look at the A in Alan. It's large and well-formed, and every letter thereafter is smaller and successively harder to read. Same thing with H. So he nailed me.
We need to have him at the next ASOTU, I think.
So my team, some of my members of my team are here, and they'll say that I will say, like, hey, we should do this or that or the other thing, but as to the details of actually getting it done, that's harder for me. I need other people on my team to fill that role. Other people on the team are really good at getting stuff done, but they may not be waking up in the middle of the night with an idea about what could be done. So figuring out, I mean, your skill set's different than your cousin's. You guys nailed it. But if you have an organization that you want to grow and you don't have that skill set, you need to go fill it with professional management. And what's nice about our industry today is 20 years ago, there weren't that many people from dealership groups that could be recruited into the Ricart. Now you have the public companies that have been out there for coming on 30 years, where they have IT people, HR people, legal people, operators, market presidents, marketing people, et cetera, where you can say, hey, this guy ran an organization for 80 stores. He could probably do a good job in our 30 stores. So you have now a talent base that didn't exist when I started in the business that I think people in this room, I'm guessing a number of people in this room probably have worked at some of the larger consolidators and then taken bigger roles in smaller companies. And that's a great resource for dealers today that didn't exist when I started in the business.
All right, we're down to our last minute. I'm going to ask the three of you to answer one question. We're going to end on an optimistic high note. What is one thing that you think the next generation, good thing that you think they will introduce into the industry? It's an easy one.
Me go first?
Okay, you can
no,
go.
that's fine. I mean, I think they will get to introduce profitable and affordable EVs as we get to the second and third generation of the technology. Honestly, if EVs can cost less, and I know it's a lot to ask, but if they can cost less than gas-powered cars to make, they'll be superior experience. People can charge at home, and we have the charging infrastructure. If we can make them cheaper and quieter and all the other good stuff, that could be a really exciting thing a while down the road.
Same question, Alan. What if you know? You remember.
I think the younger generation is more focused on the consumer experience than maybe their parents were. And to me, that's very positive, because if we can get customers to come back more often and trade with us more often, that's going to increase the size of our pie, even if the number of people in this country doesn't grow. So if we can transact more often, make it easier for them, more pleasant, more exciting for them, so buying a vehicle is a source of joy instead of going to the dentist. And I feel like the people in this room, everyone here is focused on technology, marketing, et cetera, I think. And to me, that's a positive step forward compared to the last generation.
And the step right before Alan with consumer experience is employee experience. And I think that's what I also see is compassion for employees. Because if you have a positive relationship with your employees, they are going to have a positive relationship with the customers, and that's what we want.
We kind of have these shirts that kind of summarize that. Well, it's been great. Can we hear for our panelists today? What an insightful panel. Gentlemen, thank you so much.